welcome to the show. I'm your host, Brandon Wright. On tonight's episode, we'll be joined by our guest, Melanie. She had some interesting stories to share with us about some of the stuff that happened in her past, and she was willing enough to talk about it. She calls from Australia, so there's a time difference that we had to work through to get this out for you. But it's definitely an interesting topic and definitely some interesting discussions. But before we dive in with our conversation with Melanie, if you've had an encounter and you'd like to be on the show, please send me an email at tinfoiltalespodcast@gmail.com. Again, that is tinfoiltalespodcast@gmail.com. And it doesn't even have to be about an encounter. It can be your own conspiracy theory, anything that you really like to talk about. So go ahead and, again, send me that email. We'll get something scheduled for a future episode. We're going to go ahead and dive into our conversation with Melody. So sit back, relax, and enjoy the show. I'd like to welcome Melody to the show. Melody, how are you doing?
Oh, I'm pretty good, thanks. Hi, everyone.
So you've been having some interesting encounters over the years down in Australia. So if you'd like to dive on into your story, feel free to go ahead.
Sure. Okay, so this happened a few years back. I was living inner city Melbourne in what they called an old workman's cottage. So these were cottages that were built sort of early 1900s to house all the immigrant workers coming in. I'd never really noticed anything odd about the place or anything like that. It was quite a nice, quiet house to live in. So on this particular evening, I had gone to bed. I was asleep. My partner had stayed up and had shut everything off, etc., and come to bed later. And I remember being woken up with a feeling of being scratched down the back of my neck. So I was laying on my side, and it pissed me off. That was my main response to it. I thought it was my partner. I thought he was, being a bit of an a-hole. And I remember sort of trying to, do a shrug, get off me, whatever. Went back to sleep and woke up to the feeling of a hand on my breast, squeezing hard enough that it caused pain. And that really, really pissed me off. And I'm assuming this whole time that this is my partner. And I've sat up in bed ready to give it to him, basically. What the hell are you doing? And directly in front of me, sort of floating in the air, was a disembodied hand. Now, the hand was white and it was surrounded by a soft purple sort of light, or I don't know if you want to use the term aura, around it. I sort of, freaked out a bit, screamed out. My partner woke up. I just remember at the time him sort of going, well, what's going on? And I'm there freaking out, and he's trying to settle me down and trying to work out what's going on. And it was during this time that the exhaust fan over the stove came on at full speed, so it generally has 3 speeds. And the reason that we could hear this is because of the way that these old cottages are designed. Our bedroom was right next to the kitchen area, and there's a recess, I suppose you'd call it, with a window on the kitchen side and a window on the bedroom side. And both of these windows were normally open, and where the stove sits is right against the window on the kitchen side. Now, with the fan being on speed 3, quite loud. And the thing that was weird about this is my partner would not have been able to get to sleep with the fan being on full pelt. It definitely wasn't on when he got into bed. And it was something that, I don't know, we just seemed to notice it after he had sort of calmed me down, and then all of a sudden, boom, this fan's going. And I think at this stage, he was quite a bit unsettled. I was pretty freaked out. We both got up and went and sat in the lounge room. He's turned the fan off. And yeah, we were really just sort of sitting there going, what the hell's going on? The back of my neck was stinging, and I asked him to have a look at it, and there was a visible red scratch down the back of my neck, and in fact it was there for a couple of days. We had friends over the next night, and we were talking about it, and showed them the scratch at the back of my neck. So it was enough that it had, I suppose, broken the first layer of skin. And yeah, so, and that was, sorry,
I said, was there any other, did like he have any marks on himself, or was it just on you? Or
no, it was just on me. Yeah, no, he wasn't affected in any way. But I think and he was quite a skeptical. I'm having trouble with that word. Sorry. Yeah, he didn't really put much faith in sort of supernatural or ghosts or that sort of thing. He had a very traditional Catholic upbringing. He questioned aspects of his upbringing, but yeah, he didn't really put, wasn't a firm believer in this sort of stuff. And I think it really, he was really shaken up by the physical evidence on my neck, how upset I was, and the fact that the exhaust fan had somehow managed to turn on itself running full ball. Yeah.
now, had there ever been any other previous like experiences or anything that you'd ever really noticed looking back now, that, or is this kind of like the beginning of everything?
No, I wouldn't say it was the beginning of everything. There hadn't been anything in that house. We lived there for about 3 years. I think that for me, what was strange about it is that I have had some interesting experiences when I was younger, and I have had sort of after this time, but never anything in that house. It was a really quiet, peaceful house, and so I think it's always sort of stuck in my mind, apart from the strangeness of it, that it was just this one event there. I think what I do go back to when I think about it is that my partner's father was staying with us. He was down from interstate, and the three of us had been having a bit of a debate about the afterlife. Do we have a soul? What happens when we pass? And at that age, I was very much in a place of questioning everything, not really sure where I was with my spirituality. I hadn't been raised in organised religion, and I was expressing the views, well, maybe there is nothing. Maybe we are, we're an organism. When we die, we die. It's done. There's nothing necessarily that lives on. And I remember that night my partner's dad being a little bit upset with the views that I had expressed. And when I realised that he was a little bit upset about it, I had sort of pulled back and not continued on with that topic really. But yeah, that's sort of the one thing that stands out for me that maybe had something to do with what happened, but I couldn't be sure. I can't be sure.
So you just kind of think it might have been just something showing itself to, like, because you were questioning the afterlife, and this is something that just manifested because of that?
Potentially, yeah. I'm not really sure. But yeah, I think that's a possibility, yes.
Now, after that, was there anything else in the house, or was that just kind of about the only time anything really come about?
Well, it was interesting, and I always separate these two events, even though they happened in the same night. So after we had gone back to bed, and I suppose you'd describe it as like a sleep paralysis sort of experience. And I just remember laying there, feeling paralysed, being unable to move anything, feeling intense fear and panic, and a feeling of somebody actually physically opening my mouth and my jaw and holding it apart, and a sensation of drilling in my back teeth. Now, there was no pain associated with this drilling, but it was almost like I had the sensation of my jaw being pulled apart and the tightness around that, and a little bit of sort of pressure and vibration, but not actual pain. And yes, at the time, I see that, okay, these two events are related, but I'm really on the fence about the whole, the sleep paralysis stuff. And I think that there's a strong possibility it could be something to do with how my brain was processing the information of what happened earlier in the evening. But yeah,
it seems like it'd definitely be connected if you were seeing a hand and then you could feel it scratching and then pull on you, and then hours later you're feeling like sleep paralysis. To me, I'm pretty skeptical as well about a lot of things, but doing what I've been doing lately and looking into stuff and researching, like there's so many cases similar to this that it's like there has to be something connecting the whole situation. Like there's got to be something that's causing all this. So I would believe that the paralysis was go along in with the fact that the encounter that you had. But that's just my opinion. I'm no expert.
Yeah. Yeah, and I did think that way for quite a while. But yeah, I don't know. At the same time, I've sort of thought, because I do strongly believe that what happened at first, there was too much physical evidence that something occurred, and I yeah, I've sort of tried to separate that from the sleep paralysis, because I think there's a lot of stuff either side, with opinions around what's going on with sleep, what's actually going on with sleep paralysis. So yeah, so that's why I wanted to separate the those two aspects. But yeah, certainly what happened at first was, yeah, there was definitely something going on there.
The whole thing of sleep paralysis, I haven't done a whole lot of research with it, but just the little bit I have, do you feel like you're awake, or do you feel like you're in a state of dreaming with it? Because I know some people have felt like they were awake, but it felt like they're still in a dream. So I know some people experience it differently. So I don't know how you felt.
I have okay, so from a young age I've experienced sleep paralysis, and it has two aspects for me, and I haven't always had the two together. So I have definitely always had where I've woken up and been unable to move my body, and that feeling of fear, that sort of thing. And the one way that I was always able to get out of it, since I was a young kid, I've always had animals. I've always had mainly cats, and I would always have a cat on the bed with me, and it's been able to somehow get, even if it's a finger, my little finger, to move to just touch the cat, and that's always brought me out of it. But when I was older, this probably started when I was about 17, I would have experiences where I would have particular, and I'm going to say dreams, although I don't think they're dreams, but where I would, and it didn't feel like a dream. There were too many sensations, there was too much information, and it was always quite volatile or violent, the dream. And then I would wake up from it and be sort of quite frozen. I've had experiences where this has happened probably 4 times in the one night, or over a period of an hour or two, and I would very, very quickly fall into this dream state after I'd had one dream, woken up to this paralysis feeling, managed to get myself out of it, and then very, very quickly fallen asleep into another one, and just this. And we know from the stages of sleep that it's REM sleep that we're in when we're dreaming. That doesn't happen immediately, but having this experience of sort of immediately going into REM sleep and having this dream experience and then coming back from it, because it's been quite violent, and violent as in seeing visions of friends and family having like throats cut, their guts cut and their intestines pulled out, that sort of thing, quite violent stuff. And no, I'm not a horror movie fan or anything like that, not at all. And there was one night where, I had 4 of these, and my partner at the time was lying in bed next to me, and so I was making him aware of what was happening, and he was actually watching me go through it, watching the time, and having these four lots happen in quick succession in under an hour. So yeah, I don't know if that's common with other people with what they have with sleep paralysis, but that's been my experience.
You said that was they started when you're about 17. So is this something that's continued to happen throughout your life? Do you have?
I would say probably the last 10 or 12 years. So I'm giving my age away. From about the age of 28, I would say it settled down. And yeah, really haven't had anything in the last 12 years. I have other things. I have random dreams about things happening, but that's quite rare. But yeah, no, I really haven't had anything in the last 12 years.
So you mentioned these dreams about things happening. Is that almost like a premonition type situation, you think, or?
Yeah. So did you want to know about probably the most notable one I've had?
Feel free to share whichever you like.
Okay, so look, what was this? I'm trying to think now. Maybe 5 years ago. So here in Australia, we have our own brand of football, Aussie rules football. I'm not a fan. Never have been a fan. Not really bothered, but a lot of Australia is a really big fan, and in some parts of Australia, they say it's like a religion. But the grand final was coming up. It was Adelaide versus Richmond. The view was Adelaide was going to take it out, and they were going to take it out very easily. And living in Adelaide, it was all anyone was talking about at work. Oh, yes, Adelaide's going to win. We've got this. And the grand final was on the Saturday. The Tuesday beforehand, I woke up from a dream of seeing the end of the grand final, the guys in their uniforms, and the Adelaide team was sitting down looking absolutely devastated, and I was shown the score, and that was Richmond had beat Adelaide by 42 points. And I mentioned it to my dad. I was talking to my dad about it, and my sister's partner, who was a huge Adelaide Crows fan, and he was like, no way, that's not going to happen. We've got this in the bag, blah, blah, blah. My dad, who, okay, yes, he is quite into his magical thinking, and I grew up with a lot of that, but he was like, oh, that's interesting. He said, I reckon you should put a bet on that. And I'm not really a betting person, occasional lotto ticket. But I was like, I don't know. And then it got to sort of Friday. I was over their place Friday evening, and Dad said to me again, I reckon you should put a couple of bucks down. So I put $10 down on them winning by the 42 points or so that I saw in my dream. And lo and behold, the next day, grand final, and that was the outcome. And I got 10 to 1 odds, so I got $100. That was nice. But yeah, that's probably my most notable one in recent years.
Now, if you can predict the lottery numbers for me, that would be great.
Oh, that'd be awesome. I would love to do that for myself. But yeah, I don't know. I think it's sort of, like it came out of the blue, and yeah.
Now, do you
But I
suffer
would.
from, I'm sorry, do you suffer from like deja vu a lot or anything like that? Because I know sometimes some folks experience that have some of the same, almost like a premonition, but they feel like they've seen this before or something like that.
A little bit. I wouldn't. Not too much. I mean, it could sort of be explained that way, but I don't know, it's almost just like a knowing, a feeling of like definite knowing, and there's absolutely no questioning that it's happening. Like one thing I do have, which I quite like, it's probably the main thing I would say that's still there, is that I get a message when there's what we call speed guns in Australia. So the police set up unmanned, unmarked vehicles on side roads with cameras to catch speeders. And yeah, I get a little message when one's coming up, and I just know, it's just a feeling of knowing with absolute certainty that that's there. So not that I'm a ridiculous driver or anything like that, but I think we all have times where we drift over the speed limit a bit without realizing, or we're a bit stressed and we're like, oh, I've got to get there, or what have you. But yeah, so I don't get speeding tickets at all. I know every time. That would be the only, yeah, it's just this feeling of absolute knowing certainty. This is where it's at.
Now, do you ever experience those consistently, or is it just random?
Oh, it's been fairly consistent for probably 12, 14 years. See, I used to get, and I don't get this anymore. When I was younger, I used to get some, and I mean like in my 20s, I would know who was calling. Like I would know that someone was about to call. And then within, 10 seconds or so, the phone would be ringing. This is when we all had landlines before mobiles. So someone would be calling on the landline, and yeah, I'd know who it was just before the phone call came in. And that was fun. I used to have lots of fun with friends and family members, because I'd pick up the phone and say, and like, hey Dad, how you going? Or hey Andrew, my brother. And it'd always be like, how did you know I was calling you? But yeah, but that's just, I wish it worked in other ways. I mean, it's not really, doesn't really add to anything in life, I suppose. But yeah.
Now, when stuff like this started happening, was there nothing, no traumatic experience, nothing like life change or anything like that? It all just came out of nowhere? Or I know sometimes some situations trigger certain things. So I was just curious.
I've always had stuff since I can remember. And my mum and dad have always told me to hide stuff from in public, because there were a few times where I had freaked people out, like teachers out at school, and gotten in quite a lot of trouble for it. And I was always considered to be a little bit weird, I suppose, in a way. And I remember from about the age of 7 being told quite sternly by my mother that I was not to go up and say things to people, or keep it to myself or come and talk to her and Dad about it. Things like I remember when in primary school, and I was about 7 or 8 years old, and I know what it was. I think it was, there was a group of us from all different age levels. We'd won the award of the week for our class. We were standing up on stage at school assembly. All of our names were put on a bit of paper in a container, mixed around, and one of the teachers picked out a name, and that person won a school lunch from the canteen. So in Australia, we don't get lunches. You bring your lunch from home, or you pay the canteen for a hot lunch or whatever. And I walked up there with this absolute knowing that I was going to win. And I stood up there on stage in front of the whole of school. And as they were putting the names in, and the teachers, putting her hand in, mixing it around, and I actually stepped forward and said, "Yep, it's me. I won it." And I've gotten a few weird looks, and she's done a mix again and then pulled out, and it was my name. And that teacher looked at me funny for the rest of my primary school years. But yeah.
Have you ever had any more experiences with you think paranormal, other than like that one instance that you had? You've never had any more sightings or anything like that since then, from your original story?
Oh, not really of note. No, not really. I mean, probably the one thing I have had, which I thought was quite funny, and my husband witnessed it as well. And that was when our eldest was 4, and he was having a nap in the afternoon, and he's quite a loud kid, a lot of energy. And it's that, when he had a sleep, we had like a pause. There was a nice bit of quiet. And we were seated at the kitchen table, which had a view down the hallway where the bedrooms come off. And just remember it being quiet, and I don't know, there was something happened. It was kind of like a feeling like there was a change in the air. And both me and my husband looked up at the same time and looked down the hallway. And it was almost like we kind of heard a bit of, and I don't even know how to describe it, it was almost like a bit of a laugh or a happy sound. And we saw something come out of our son's room. And it wasn't sort of solid. It was just sort of something came out and then sort of 2-3 steps down the hallway and disappeared. And we both looked at each other, and then about probably 10 seconds later, my son woke up and ran out of the room and making lots of noise and that sort of thing. And we had talked about that, and in my husband's culture, they're quite open to a lot of that sort of stuff, and he gave it a particular name, which I don't remember, but he said it's a child spirit. That would probably be the most notable thing since then.
Okay. Yeah, that's interesting. No, I don't envy anyone that has experiences all the time, like with ghost or anything like that, just because, like I said, I'm kind of skeptical on certain things, but I've experienced some things as well that I can't explain. So, especially something that like that where you can't control and it's right on you and it's causing you physical harm. To me, that's something that I would never want to experience or have experienced on anyone I know, especially having a family and everything. So definitely don't envy anyone that has to go through that.
Yeah. Fortunately, I haven't had one experience that I spoke about is the main one that involved physical harm.
Yeah.
But I have heard of people who have experienced it quite a lot, or that would not be great.
No, definitely not. Okay, well, I definitely want to thank you for taking the time to talk with me tonight, and definitely an interesting story, and some of the stuff that you'd said makes me kind of just wonder how things can work the way they work, especially like kind of just knowing how someone's going to call you, or knowing their speed. Like, it's just weird how the mind works, I guess. So
yeah, I think so. I do. A part of me thinks that, is it just recognition of patterns? So is there's a pattern with particular people of what time of the day they call me? So I've definitely, sort of thought about it along that lines. But
I can understand that. That's kind of how I think about things too, is I always try and rationalize that there's got to be some sort of an explanation, but then you get to a point where you just can't explain it.
Yeah.
Okay. Again, I do definitely want to thank you for taking the time out and talking with me, and definitely appreciate it.
Not a problem. Thanks very much. And I hope
you have a good night.
Yeah. You too.
Thank you. Bye-bye. That's our show, everyone. Again, thanks to Melanie for taking the time, coming out on the show, talking with us for a little bit. And again, if you've had an encounter and would like to be on the show, please send me a message. You can send me an email at tinfoiltalespodcast@gmail.com. Again, that is tinfoiltalespodcast@gmail.com. Or you can contact me through Facebook, and we'll figure something out for a future episode. Good night, everyone.